so you want me to tell you the story of my life.
Like I said, that's what I do. I interview people. I'm a collector of lives.
Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. This is the show where I go one-on-one with a creator, author, illustrator, publisher, or other mover and shaker in the world of tabletop games, video games, TV, movies, or any other area of the geekverse.
You followed me here, didn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I did. You seem very interesting. This is where you live?
Yes, this is my home. Welcome.
So, what do you do?
I'm a vampire.
That's something I haven't heard before.
Guests have included individuals such as Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and even the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price.
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. I haven't gotten to talk to him yet, but maybe sometime in the future. But how about Brian Colin, the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG and sculptor of the world of Revelo monster busts? Mark Tassin, the creator of the world of Italtus, head of Mechanical Muse, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. I've spoken with Jeff Engelstein, game designer and former commentator on the Dice Tower. He and I got deep into the statistics, probability, and psychological function of dice in tabletop games. Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games and crowdfunder extraordinaire. He's published many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. I've spoken with Sydney Engelstein from Indie Boards and Cards to talk about what it really takes to publish a board game in today's environment and what it would take for you to get published if you were trying to get a publisher for your board game. I've spoken with Ajit George about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and his development of the Journey Through the Radiant Citadel Dungeons & Dragons book. Let's see, who else have I spoken to?
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Yes, I really appreciate her taking the time to speak with me. That was a great interview. I've also spoken with Cameron Pasha, a writer and novelist who's been working in Hollywood for over 20 years. His projects have included Emmy and Golden Globe nominated Sleeper Cell, Kings, Nikita, and Roswell, New Mexico. His analysis and commentary have been very popular on YouTube. I've gotten to speak with Paul Shadow, the former network executive, who has made quite a splash here on YouTube with his reaction videos to current movies and films. He and I discussed the status of independent film and web productions online today. Brianna da Silva is a reoccurring guest on the show, and a very popular one at that. She's an author and director, and she was also the co-writer of the Cultist comedy web show that's here on the channel. She and I regularly meet to study and analyze stories. I've also gotten to speak with of the Positive Fandom channel. She's an ally in our effort to be a positive and constructive force in the geekverse. Are you ready? Have you got your drink? Are you all settled in? You might want to buckle up because it could be a wild ride. We're about to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and the geekverse through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Good evening, everyone. It is so good to see you here. Welcome, welcome. It is great to have you here on Table Talk, and this is a very special episode because Brianna da Silva is going to be back here, and ordinarily we only get to have her once every couple of weeks, but we have the opportunity to get back to talk with her again, and we're going to be analyzing Pan's Labyrinth. She and I watched that last night. So, hey, let's bring her on right now. Everyone welcome Brianna da Silva.
Hello.
Everyone,
Brianna with Levi.
I was about to say, it actually looks like we have an extra special guest tonight.
Sure do.
Levi,
He's
the
gonna be
dragon,
joining us
is out of the cage and joining us tonight.
And there is a funny thing that just happened during the countdown, which was that I was stepped outside for a second and my roommate's cat ran into my room. So she's hiding. At some point, I may, in the middle of our conversation, have to get up, yell at her, and get her out of my room. But the moment there is a cat somewhere in the background of my room. Yes.
All right. Well, okay. So we're going to be talking about Pan's Labyrinth tonight, but I want to welcome everyone who is here with us. Brett Hamilton says, discovered your channel recently through the Hero Quest videos. Really enjoyed dinner and board game videos.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad to have you here tonight. So welcome, Brett. It is great to have you here. Ichiro Fuma, one of my favorite movies. Welcome, welcome. It is. I'm so interested to see what is being said. Well, it is so great to have you here. Zero the Blade, one of our channel members. Thank you so much to all the channel members. Zero the Blade is here, as well as James Bacon. Good evening to all. And as James says, he got the red chevron shield. Your coat of arms upgrades on the channel if you are a channel member. And I've actually been thinking about channel membership quite a bit over the past couple of days. So we got some more things coming on. Mike Hansford, another channel member. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. Oh, I think this is about Levi here.
We'll step away for one moment as I think I can catch the cat now.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Well,
continue with the comments. Hold on.
is here, and she sends a
Upside
super
down.
sticker. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I thank you so much, everybody. I've been watching her play video games. Please be sure to check out her channel, Positive Fandom. I was actually thinking, I want to have I want to have you back on the channel. I was just thinking about some extra topics. Oh no! Oh, there's that cat. I was thinking about some things that we should talk about on Table Talk very soon. So I sent you a message on that. Nostros Labro. Oh my God! I don't even know how to say all of this. Nostros Labros. Wait, go ahead, Brianna, say it.
I said nosotros los lobos estamos regresando, except I don't know what half those words mean. So
Okay. The only thing I did not like was the political stance of Guillermo del Toro on the movie. The Reds literally genocide myriads of Spaniards. All right. Okay. Well, there's a lot to talk about that. And it says I'm Spaniards, by the way.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about that point of history, which is interesting coming in and watching the movie because I'm like, I don't know what this is referencing.
Well,
I've never really read into it, but
yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different things we could talk about here, and one of the aspects that I didn't think about, I was taking notes. We watched, she and I, Brianna and I watched it yesterday evening. And then I've been thinking about it since. And then I took a couple of hours today to specifically make sure that I was to take more notes and to think about it. But one of the things that I didn't analyze it from the perspective of is its historical context, other than in deep detail, other than to say, okay, the Spanish Civil War, we often study that as a footnote and a precursor to World War II.
Right. Yeah, that's all that I ever hear about it.
And so
in the United States, that is.
Yes, here in the United States. We're both here in the United States. So I understood it in that context, but when I was trying to write things about the theme of the story and such, I didn't actually get into the historical context. I don't know if you did or not, but
no.
Okay. So as just a general disclaimer here, I was not getting into the historical context, other than I understood that what he was trying to do was use a lesser known historical backdrop for the film.
But it may be in Spain. It's not so lesser known.
Right. Yes. No, right. Not in Spain. I'm talking, okay, over here in the context of the United States. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Icho Fumo says, I like snake. I've been practicing that.
I can tell you seem to be really.
I can do it so well when I'm not on camera, and then the camera comes on and I can't. Hey, Zero Theory, welcome. Okay. Okay. So on that comment says the movie is set during the Spanish Civil War, right? And Del Toro is clearly lefty. Beyond that, his approach to fairy tales was amazing and highly compelling. So I think for the most part, I'm going to be talking about the relationship with the fairy tale. I think the historical context is very important, but in a limited amount of time, I think we'll talk on this. My notes were on the story structure, what it was trying to say, and the relationship between reality and fairy tales. So that's probably where we're going to be going here. At least I am. Zero Theory, and then we'll talk. But Zero Theory says, I watched this movie years ago and liked it, but one thing I remember, the trailers made it look like it was going to be a fantasy movie. And actually, I had never seen the trailers. For some reason, this movie had ended up on my list to watch. But I didn't know anything about it as I went in to watch it last night with Brianna. I knew nothing about it. It was great because I used to go to the theater and just watch, like, pick a movie.
Mm-hmm.
When I was living real close to a movie theater. It was great. I really enjoyed that. I would just go over there. It's like every Friday night I go and watch a movie. I just pick one, even if I don't know anything about it. I was watching a movie on Friday night. And so it was great to kind of return to that. Okay. So let's start the discussion then, Brianna. How do you want to frame it? How do you want to frame the discussion of this movie?
Well, I mean, for me, there are a number of different takeaways. I mean, there's I was studying it kind of as a director, which is not going to be interesting, I don't think, to the audience that much. Also, I'm really interested in how specifically Ophelia's like the fairy tale aspects of the story correlate to like a hero's journey kind of a thing, and the ways that it
Okay.
differs. That's kind of an interesting topic. The biggest thing I like to talk about with the story is the villain, how he's handled, and sort of the arc that he has, which I think is really really good. So those are kind of the two big things that I'd be interested in talking about. But what about
Okay. Well, that sounds great because I know you said you had a lot of info or notes that you had taken on the story arc of the villain, and I don't have anything on that, so I'd be interested to know what you're saying about that. I've just got a couple of notes on the structure of the movie. So that's a good one that we've got some things to talk about there. But let's start with this question, which is the classic English teacher's question. What is this movie about?
Oh, interesting. I didn't even ask that. But a quick side note, I just remember there's a third thing to talk about
Okay.
maybe at the end, but I'm not going to say what it is.
Okay. All
I'll show
right.
you what's
Okay.
happening. But yeah. What is the story about? Well, I assume that you probably have some answers. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I have an answer because like that in the past, like when you're in college, that seems to be the question the English teacher always asks. What's this
Right.
about? And they're not talking, and what they do not want is a recitation of the plot. Oh, this is a movie about
Right. What's the
Heath.
theme, in other
Yeah,
words?
they're talking about
Oh,
what's
I have a suggestion, but do you want to go
okay.
first?
Well, no, go ahead.
I would think it has something to do with the relationship between uh, like authority and then the people under authority,
Oh,
and whether or not you should question it. Because I noticed that only in the second watch that there was a parallel with like the doctor when the he tells the captain at one point he's like, you know, to obey an order like that without questioning it at all is something only someone like you could do. And then very not long after that, the fawn does the final test with Ophelia, where he
yeah,
says, "You need to do exactly what I say. Don't question it." It is like the wording was almost exactly the same, and she ends up
yes.
choosing the right thing as opposed to the villain who chooses the wrong thing. And I thought that was really interesting. I didn't pick up on that detail the first time I watched it, so it seems like there's something there about, you know, because you have your basic, you know, in the real world, you've got, you know, as it's framed in the story. Of course, I don't know the historical context, but in the movie, you've got these rebels that are resisting authority, and so there seems to be something there in the theme. But I don't know, what do you think?
That is exactly what I picked up on. My single word, though, my single word was this movie is about disobedience.
About disobedience?
Yes, this movie is about disobedience.
Interesting.
But
Mhm.
for all the reasons that you just described,
Yeah.
the different types of times when that or different instances in this movie where this comes up. This is a
Mhm.
movie about you said questioning authority or whatever, but so I just
Right.
generalized that to say this movie's about disobedience.
Interesting. Yeah, I can go with that. I don't know
Um,
what he wants to do.
okay. Um, we could go immediately to the structure of this movie, but to me, immediately after I had come up with or tried to talk about what this movie was about, and I come up with
Mhm.
disobedience, the next obvious question that I think the movie prompts you to ask is whether or not the fantasy elements of this movie are actually real or not.
Oh, that was gonna be the third thing.
Oh, really?
We can talk
Okay.
about that for early too, because I
Okay.
had a bunch of thoughts on that as well.
Okay. Well, I actually think that's the thing that this movie prompts you to talk about immediately.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's go to that then. Are the fantasy elements of this movie real?
You can make a really good argument for both, I think.
Okay.
And my take is that the movie is intentionally leaving that open, that it's not trying to say that it is real or isn't real, because so I noticed three, maybe four things, kind of an argument that the fantasy world isn't real, which is a really sad. It would be a really sad thing to be true in the story. Um, that it could be that this magical world is all Ophelia's like imagination, kind of her coping mechanism. So the first thing is that the opening narration that's kind of setting up the fantasy environment, it leads right into her reading a book. So that kind of could imply that narration we're hearing is something that she's reading at that moment. And then there's of course the moment when at the end when the captain follows her and she's talking to the fawn and he doesn't see anything.
Yeah.
That could be either that for some reason he's not able to see what she sees, or just that she's imagining it. Also, and I think the strongest one that really leaves you the feeling at the end of like, was that all real? Was the fact that we see at the end when she goes to the obviously I'm spoiling the movie, so hopefully people have already seen it. But
Well, yeah, you say that on these type of streams when
We're
we're
always
doing the story and all that you can expect spoilers. We're
right,
not deliberately spoiling things, but we're talking about the whole thing as in an
right.
analytical perspective. So just expect that. Yeah.
Yes, good comment. But you see like that whole thing about her going into the underworld, all of this happens not when you expect it to be, which is the moment she dies. It's in those moments while she's still dying. And the fantasy, or that fantasy setting, that part ends as soon as she dies. So it looks like she's imagining it as she's dying. And then another thing, that kind of a minor thing would be here, I think he wants to look at you guys.
Oh, hey everybody.
He's acting really restless. Here, you going to see what's going
There
on?
we go. Hey everybody.
Just hold him for a minute while I talk, I guess. The other thing is that the mother says at some point she yelled at her and she's like, magic isn't real. And so that could be a hint. Oh, that the mandrake at that same scene, the mandrake in the fire screams and the mother doesn't react. So those are kind of a lot of reasons to think that, but there is one really strong reason to think that the magic is real.
Oh, really? Okay.
He's so cute. And that is that when she puts the mandrake under her mom's bed, it does actually heal her.
That's a great point.
Right. So if the magical world is fake, then you have to assume that that is just a coincidence, because there isn't really any other explanation offered in the story about why she starts to get better and then immediately gets worse when the mandrake is removed. And so it's like that's only one thing, but it's a really strong indication that it is real. So it's kind of hard to say, and I think that's probably on purpose. I think you're supposed to be able to interpret it both ways. That would be my guess.
That is a fantastic point about the mother, because I thought about that as I was watching it the first time, but then
Yeah.
it didn't make it over here to my notes as I was thinking about this again. That is probably the strongest argument that this is real. That when she put the mandrake under the bed, her mother did get better.
And the doctor's like, I can't explain it. I don't know why. They act like it's very mysterious. So
Okay, I'm going to have to think about that in the context of my other notes now. Because you're right. Levi,
he's sitting next to you. So we don't know if he's distracting right now, but I'm just trying to give him some stimulation.
Poor Levi. Like he likes the stories about
he's watching the screen, but you guys can't see him anymore.
I had come. I think when I watched this through the first time, yes, you're right. The mandrake being successful in healing the mother was a strong argument in favor of this. Right. But as I was watching it through again before tonight, and taking notes and also going and thinking about this, I hadn't gotten that deep into the. I watched about the first 45 minutes again, and I had come to a rather depressing interpretation of the story, in that it was not real.
Yeah, and were there additional things that you were noticing to come away with?
Yeah. So what had drawn me to that then was that it starts with her dying, and of course I think it's really interesting often to watch the movie again, especially in those situations where you reinterpret the beginning scenes in light of having seen it. And so, of course, when I watched that the first time, you're just watching whatever, but then when you watch it again, you go, oh, this movie starts with her dying.
Right.
Like that's the very start of this. And so the start of this is its end. And so when it's starting to tell that story about the princess, she's dying.
Right.
And she's talking about that I will come back and be reborn into another life. That's like, then when I rewatched it and I saw that, it was a rather depressing. This is very dark fantasy. I like dark fantasy, so I like, but it's like that added an extra kind of depressing tone to this.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing that started was actually her dying, and so that's very sad. She does have the physical birthmark of the moon.
Right, but that could be that she's giving it a story to it or something.
Exactly. So that's how I interpreted that then, is that she's got this moon-shaped birthmark, and now she's interpreting it in this particularly fantasy.
Or she's imagining that it's there. Because it's also like in her if we assume this is a fantasy, the order of events is that she acts as if she's seeing it for the first time or noticing it for the first time when she looks at it in the mirror, even though beforehand, he tells her to look. So that one is also a little bit murky. Depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. When she encounters the fairy for the first time, it's because she showed what grasshopper or whatever it is. She showed the grasshopper the book, and then I was like, "Oh my god, she's imagining this."
Mm-hmm. And then it changes its shape.
Yeah. Now, there is also the mandrake root. I put that on here as something that appears in both places. I was looking for things that appear in both places. You're right. The mandrake roots appear in both places. The let's say real world and the fantasy world.
Right.
But then you're right that the mandrake root has an effect. When I was watching it the first time with you, I thought that it was extremely significant that it never shows you her getting into the captain's room to take her brother. I thought that was a very significant thing, because the fawn says, she says the door's locked. You got to take your brother. She says the door's locked. The fawn says, then make your own door. And he hands her the chalk.
Yeah.
But that it never actually shows you her drawing a door or something like that. And
we see the door drawn afterwards, but we don't know.
Right. You see the door drawn afterward. You do see that because Mercedes sees that afterward, but you don't ever see.
Sorry. He's swimming. I should probably put him away. He's going to be distracting. Hold on. You keep talking.
Okay. Because you're right. You see that drawn afterwards, but that you don't ever see her getting into the captain's room by magic. And I did think that was significant, even the first time that I saw it. The piece of chalk does appear in both worlds, because the captain gets the piece of chalk or sees it there. And they never actually prepped you sort of with that. Like if I were going to think that the chalk could have been there because of something physical, I mean, that's not that strange an object. I guess the idea is that's not, a piece of chalk isn't that strange an object. But if they had been like by a place where chalk was being mined or something like that, then you're like, okay, then that's there for a physical reason. But on the other hand, it's a very common kind of thing. We talked about the fawn was not there when the captain appears. And then you see through the captain's eyes, the fawn is not there.
Right.
And I think that's significant. So for all of those reasons, when I was watching back, although you're right. If I had gotten to the part of the mandrake, although sometimes people do just get better.
Right. So it would have to be coincidental that she was getting better and then immediately got worse, and it just happened in time with that, which is possible. But in a story, usually you don't expect things to be coincidences in the real world, perhaps. But then that also brings in the question of like, those kind of remedies in older times, people would use them in part because those coincidences happen, and so sometimes it does seem like it would work. So it could be kind of playing into that. I don't know. I want to believe that it was real because it's accurate.
It was real. I think that it's true that it's deliberately vague. I don't think there's any way to come across with this that's deliberately vague.
Mm-hmm.
Although it seems like I came to the conclusion that I was like, oh my God, this is her fantasy. Mm-hmm. So you want to go the other way, but it's vague.
Emotionally.
So emotionally, I want to go the other way too.
Right.
That's like, this is something that was real, but then Especially as I was watching it again, I realized it starts with her death. I was like, oh my God. So I had a different take on it with that. Okay. Let's do it. Let's look at a couple of comments and then
there've been some
we'll
comments.
go to what you have to say. Says, I also didn't get into the historical context. I was more drawn to the spectacular imagery and its symbolism. I still enjoy the film. Trey says, this is one of my favorite horror movies and fairy tales. One of Doug Jones' creepiest roles, the Pale Man. I want to talk about the Pale Man specifically here soon. Nostros says it's a fantasy movie, but more akin to the fantastic side of the world and how kids can travel to the other world by innocence. Only innocence was a big factor in that, because when I first watched that, I was like, oh my God, she's innocent, so she's gonna be able to work some magic. But then
this is always, it certainly is a fantasy story. It's not like a secondary world fantasy story, but yeah, it's still fantasy.
Nostra says, when in the MC dies is akin to the little princess in order to return to his home world. The little prince in order to return to his home world. The girl returns to his real home, the fantastic world. In the Catholic tradition, our real home is heaven. Iricho Fuma says, wonder if they've seen Mother.
I have.
Okay.
Mother, as in with that exclamation mark at the end. So I like that film. Though I will never watch it again. I liked it, but we'll never watch it again.
It's partly a story about the innocence of a child faced with war. Yeah, I think it is. I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that, especially if you're interpreting what is going on here with the fantasy side of thing as her response to dealing with what is going on. I absolutely think so. James says, I think it's both. The audience is supposed to be left with ambiguity because it's not comfortable or comforting. Yes, please do hit the like button and hit the
smash it until it breaks. Just break that like button.
Yes. And also, by the way, if you are here and you're not part of the Discord server, I'm going to put the Discord server link in here right now. Raven, keep Discord. Please come and join us. I'm not going to be able to hit everybody's chats. I'm just scrolling through here to see what's going on here. What's going on, because lots of stuff is happening in the comments. James says, if the fairy world is real, then it hinges on the belief of an innocent child. We all used to believe is the difference between innocence and experience, as William Blake proposed in his poetry.
Yeah, it could be that kind of a situation where it's her belief makes it real in a sense. Or her belief is what's bringing it into the real world.
Okay, well, where do you want to go from there? The structure?
Let's talk structure next. I feel like that's a good...
Okay, let's go to structure then.
Yeah.
You want to lead off?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because this brings a little bit of another conversation, which I'll only briefly touch on, that I mentioned to you that we might want to do. I'm not ready for this yet, but we might want to do a follow-up to our hero's journey talk, just because I feel that, at least on my end, I'm understanding the original Campbellian version of it better now that I've actually read through his book. And I'll just briefly say that there's a lot of, there's the hero's journey, which I forget the name of the author. I'll read that book next. But there's basically someone wrote that afterwards and was like, here's the lessons from Campbell for writers. And it's often described online that these are kind of two different hero's journeys, that there's like one with like 17 steps, and then there's the combined version with 12 steps. And I'm not convinced that that's accurate. A lot of what Campbell talks about in those steps are actually alternative versions of the same step. For example, there's the stealing the elixir, or atonement with father, or meeting the goddess. All those happen at the same point. Those are different options, for example. And so what I've come to realize is that in the most basic form of like an old fairy tale kind of a story, that there's kind of a lot fewer kind of bare bones that you could think about in terms of like how to approach it. And so So with that framework, I went through. I didn't go through like with the 12 steps of the other guy. If you want to, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but so let's see, because there were some interesting things where it was a little bit different too. So first of all, the call to adventure. Where do you think the call to adventure happens? Because I think there's kind of more than one answer.
Well, interesting. That's the only note that I took because I had notes ready as we were watching last night, and then I
Yeah.
had to take more. But I stopped taking notes as I was watching because I was just captivated, and I had to come
Mm.
back and take notes. But the only note that I had in the middle of the first watching was that the fawn seemed to be the part of the herald. When he
Okay.
says in the first call that this is what you've got to do, you've got 3 tasks before the moon is full. I was like, okay, so my only note was that the fawn seemed to strike that role as the herald issuing the call to adventure. You have other reasons for other things than that?
No, I actually disagree with that. I think
Okay.
it's the fairy because or you could even say it's either the fairy or it's the like that time when like the very first thing she does is she finds this little stone, and she kind of walks away and she picks it up and she's going into it and investigating, and then when she puts that stone like in the that old thing where it's broken, the bug, the fairy comes out and it
Right.
follows her,
Yeah.
and then in the middle of the night um, she understands that it wants her to follow it. And so she follows it into the labyrinth. And then the labyrinth, and there was already the sins beforehand that, this is a dangerous place. You don't want to go.
Yes.
And to me, I think the fawn plays more the role of the helper, or as we sometimes say today, like the mentor, because basically at that point she's already kind of crossing into that world, and he's telling her what she then needs to go and do. He's giving her the instructions, basically. Um, because and here's an interesting side note because I want to talk a little bit about the difference between, or potentially this is something that you're going to bring someone on later. I don't know if I should tell people about that, but there'll be more conversations later about potential differences between like a hero's journey and like a heroine's journey. And one of the things that I've heard other people say is that you often notice um, in your classic hero's journey, you have the home is this place that you don't want to leave, right? And that the call to adventure, there's often a resistance that because you don't want to leave your home, and you have to go out into this other world, and then you eventually return to it. But I've heard some people say that oftentimes with a female character, it's the opposite. And I don't think it's female characters. I think it's just any character that's an oppression. Because I think, for example, Harry Potter fits into this as a male hero. But if you're in a state of, often for female characters, if you're in a state that is patriarchal or oppressive in any way, the home is kind of the nightmare you want to escape, and there isn't going to
Mm,
be a return at the end. This story fits into that because her ordinary world is horrible and she doesn't want to be there, and the whole time she's fighting basically for her right to leave it.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
yeah, so it's not about here's my world and I'm going to go out there and I have to do these tasks and then return. It's like I don't want to be here. I want to get to this other fantasy world. And in the story, she's crossing back and forth constantly, which is also different. It's not like I leave once and then come back. It's you can kind of say that she starts the adventure when she enters the labyrinth at the first time, but she has to keep crossing, and the whole time she's she's trying to get there, and she's victorious when she finally leaves, which I think is a really interesting thing to compare.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that is very interesting. Now, you're talking about, so we're going to be talking with, we've got information on the feminine side of the hero's journey. I actually did talk about that this morning. On
Oh, yeah.
Thursday, and 2 more nights, we'll be talking with Douglas Burton, who I was recommended to talk to because he is writing a book on the feminine side of the hero's journey. So that's something we're going to be getting into over a number of different
Mhm.
episodes, starting. I
Right.
mean, you and I have already talked about it, but we're going to be
Right.
getting into it
I've
together.
been thinking about it a lot myself and
Uh,
researching it, but yeah.
okay, well, that's interesting because I'm going to put together like a slide or something like that so we can
Mhm.
articulate the kind of stuff that we have been talking about here, because we've been talking about the feminine version of the hero's
Right.
journey, and that's really interesting that you're talking about that the home is something you're supposed to get away from.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I'm
but
not
I don't
sure
think
about that's
it's
feminine.
I don't think it's feminine. I think it's
Okay,
specifically because I imagine if you went 20,000 years ago, we wouldn't be having that with your feminine heroes. I think it's specifically if your character is living in a state that is oppressive. So that's why I mentioned Harry Potter, because that's not a feminine, hero, but he
Yeah.
has the same thing where his ordinary world is a place he wants to escape.
You got to get away from the home.
He never
Luke,
returns.
Luke
He goes-
Skywalker's got to get away from his home. So that's not a feminine thing.
Well, no, but he still, Luke Skywalker is an interesting one because he doesn't come back to that same place. So that would be an interesting one to think about. But there's still like you still feel a sense of like he comes back to a sense of home, but it's like a new home. So I don't know. That's an interesting one to think about. But no, I don't. I specifically disagree with what I've heard people say.
Okay.
That I don't think it's a feminine thing, but I think you do see it more often with female characters. I've been noticing it everywhere now that I'm looking, and I think it's because a lot of female characters are written in places of, patriarchy, which for a woman is something that you want to escape from. The home is not safe often. The home is this place you're being suppressed, and so you see that in a lot of, like, I think about a lot of books I read as a kid when I was a little girl. I'm like, a lot of them had that aspect of like, I want to get away. I'm not resisting the call. It's what I want most. But anyway, that's kind of a whole other topic. But
No, wait, just so I can be clear. So you're talking about, because I can totally see as a modern interpretation the home as something that is oppressive for women. Like I can totally see that. Except for when I'm thinking about something like all of our classic male heroes, the home is also an oppressive place for them.
I don't know that it's always the home is always an oppressive place though, because sometimes
like Luke Skywalker is our classic example.
Well, what about Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings is like a very much the opposite. I mean, there are a lot of myths where I think the home, like Odysseus would be another example of one where the whole time you want to get home. And so I think you see that more often. That's why I'm saying I don't think it's feminine, because you can have both in both types of heroes. But I think proportionally, it's probably more common in stories written in patriarchal settings that you will have that with a female character. But I think that's happening less and less now today, because in the West, where we're writing a bunch of all these stories, women aren't under patriarchy anymore, despite what some people say.
I'm not sure about that, because in the Lord of the Rings, I mean, if you're looking for adventure, where are you not going to find that at home?
Yeah, but the whole tone of Lord of the Rings is like he wants adventure, but it ends up being that his adventure isn't what he wants. It ends up being something a lot darker that he is reluctant to, and that there's a sense of return at the end. Like that's obviously a completely different tone than say a story like this one. Like there's that, like they're doing everything for the Shire. Like they're not trying to save the world; they're trying to save the Shire. They're trying to save their home. So I think, which is why I don't really like calling it a feminine masculine distinction. I think it's just two different versions of that kind of a heroic story, that sometimes you're at your home and you have to go out into the world and you get other things and then return, which is basically what the Campbellian, I don't know if that's a word, but Joseph Campbell's way he talks about the hero's journey, he talks about it that way exclusively, that there's always, he talks about it as like a metaphor for like sleeping and consciousness and how you kind of come in and out of both, which is kind of weird. But that you could have that, and you could also have that you want to get away from home and you never return from it, that that the hero is now in a different state. So I think
this is something we should talk about. We're actually as we come up with these other episodes, we're going to be approaching it. But because as I'm saying, you're talking about, what about Percival? The story of Percival, when we're talking about the
that's a great example. That would be a great example of that for sure.
Of what?
That would be a great example of that. Yeah, because he's
saying.
Yeah, because isn't he someone that wants to leave? He's being suppressed where he is, and so he needs to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand the confusion.
right. Yeah, I must not understand the confusion too, because I would say that Percival is a situation where he's got to get away from home,
right?
And he's clearly being oppressed by his mother, the feminine.
Right, which is why I'm saying these are just two different ways you can tell the story. Like so I reject the idea that one is just for women and one is just for men. That's what I'm saying. I reject that idea. I don't think that makes any sense. So I think Campbell is his version of the hero's journey is incomplete. That this is another aspect of what that can look like. That there isn't always a return. Are we still not on the same page? You look confused.
Well, I am, because I think I thought that we got onto this in. Why did I think that we got onto this? I thought that we got onto this because she was unsafe in this story that we're talking about with Pan's Labyrinth. She's
Right.
unsafe at home,
Right.
and so she yearns to go away.
Mhm.
And I thought that we were saying that was a feminine element.
No, so what I'm
No.
saying is some people say it is, and I disagree.
You disagree with that. Okay.
I disagree.
That's
Yeah.
why Percival and Luke Skywalker also have that.
Yes, yeah, those are perfect examples of what I'm talking about.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to see. Trey says, I would point out that if she was not alive. Now, well, Trey says, I would point out that she's not alive. Then why did the fawn warn her not to eat the fruit, or she will never return? This is usually a warning about the Fey realm.
Hmm.
I said it starts with her death, but then I thought that it was told in flashback.
Yeah, that's like a whatever, your life flashing before your eyes, kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah. So I thought that it was told in flashback as she was dying.
Hmm.
In retrospect. James says, I've always interpreted that it isn't about whether or not she really made it home or not. It's about us, the audience, never being able to, because we question if it's real.
Interesting.
I thought that it is definitely, I think, a sad, comes up with a sad thought experiment. I just saw that in the comments going by. Oh yeah, I can handle a sad thought experiment. It seemed to me on the second watch through that it was a sad Luke Skywalker. Who is Luke Skywalker? What are you so, well, he doesn't stay home. Frodo, James Bacon says, but Frodo doesn't go home.
I guess all the rest of the hobbits do.
Ultimately, he doesn't stay home.
Yeah.
Says the reality of having made impossible decisions and the repercussions from those decisions is forefront in this film. Let me say that again. The reality of having to make impossible decisions and the repercussions of those decisions is forefront in this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. I'm sorry. We got behind in the chat. Well, okay. So one of the things that I thought as I was watching it through the first time is that it didn't set up her reason for eating the grape.
Yeah, I thought that. Are we still talking structure, or did you want to shift?
Well, I'm not sure if it can certainly still be structure, because I mean, certainly this was just the next thing that I was thinking of, is that when I was watching it the first time, I was thinking that I guess you would say structurally, it didn't set up, like, why did she eat that grape?
Yeah, I thought it was that, like, when you're watching it at first, when you're watching that scene, it seems as if she's kind of falling under the magic of the place or something, and you think that she's not in her right mind. But then later she justifies it. She's like, it was just two. I didn't think anyone would notice. And I was like, really? That didn't seem to make sense to me. It seemed like that should have been explained a little bit differently.
Okay, yeah. See, that was my thought on the first watch through as well. Now, on the second watch through, when I was trying to go through it, and when I thought that what this movie is about is disobedience.
Yeah, interesting.
That I realized that, if the theme of this movie is disobedience, then this is a disobedience fantasy. She was told to go and do these things, and and do not eat any of this food. And so, but her that there are other people in this story who can disobey physically. The rebels in the woods, the people who are working for the soldiers, like that have a real opportunity to disobey in the physical realm. but she doesn't have a way to disobey physically because she's not that powerful in the physical world. You know,
Right.
she's just a kid.
She also the fairies told her to go for a different keyhole too, and she didn't go for the one they told her to.
Oh, was that the case? Okay, and now I
I
remember
think so.
her going, "No, not that one. Let me
Yeah,
go over
because
here
they're
to the."
pointing at it, and then she goes, "No, it's this one."
So I think in retrospect, after having thought about it, that has to do with being part of a disobedience fantasy.
Okay, interesting. More
That's
depressing conclusions, but we'll go with it.
well, it's possible. I'm not sure. Like this is the hypothesis I was working on then, that like what explains her eating the food.
Mhm.
It's that, well, I would say that for sure there is supposed to be a mirror between she was going to the dinner party with the captain, and they've got food, and they've got her going down with what they're calling the pale man, and there's food, and she's disobeying.
Mhm.
So a possible hypothesis here is that the explanation for that is just disobedience fantasy. She's told things by the captain, and she's also told things like you were talking about. She's deliberately told things by the fawn, because I think there is more parallels between the fawn and the captain there. There's supposed to be. And so when the fawn tells her, don't eat anything, so what's the fantasy to disobey? So, and then it's that there's got to be something too when the pale man picks up the eyeballs after she eats. But it's not that after she eats, it's after she disobeys. That when you disobey, you are seen. But that's the problem, right? That if you're talking about the a fascist government, this overall whatever, that if you disobey, you're seen. There's the person who's not watching as long as you are obeying by the rules, and then you disobey, and now you are seen with this really crazy guy with his eyeballs in his hand. So talking about structure there, that my point was that I didn't see the reason. I was looking for more reason for that on the first watch through, but that perhaps I understand it in retrospect as disobedience fantasy.
That makes sense.
Let's see. Harum says, I thought it was about survival too, although they face failure in saving their own lives. And Retro Nerd Girl is also here. Welcome, Retro Nerd Girl. Hi, Heath and Brianna. Catching this late. I'll definitely be watching the earlier portions afterwards. Good to see you. Good to see you. So that kind of concluded, I think. Oh, okay. So we'll go to the villain part right after this, because you've got notes on the villain, which I don't have.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that because of that, I was equating something about the fawn and the captain because they are both demanding obedience, and so I also thought that it was weak, and I haven't thought this through anymore, but that the fawn reappears to give her a second chance.
Yeah.
And I was thinking on the first watch through, she was supposed to do something to earn that second chance. Did she earn it, or did she earn it and I miss it, or did she not earn it? I was trying to figure out why that was that she got a second chance.
That did happen after she tried to run away. So I don't know if that was like her showing courage or something, or if it's the depressing conclusion that she's imagining it, that things were so dark at that point that she had to imagine her fantasy going differently. Because that's when things are starting to get worse, which I have more comments on that structure wise, unless you want to.
Okay. Well, that was my notes that I didn't. If we come up with something about the second chance, we should talk about it. But I didn't have a reason. So let's go to the story, the villain story arc, and the notes that you've got. Let's go.
Well, wait. I want to talk a little bit more about structure first.
Oh, okay. Oh no. Okay. The structure. Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we had the cult adventure, the helper, which I was saying was probably the fawn. And then you have your tests and helpers. So she has two tests that are mostly going well until, of course, that one goes poorly. She has the magical aids in the form of objects and entities that both assist her. And then when you apply that then to like a classic cinematic 4-part structure, or like the 3-act structure, but it's easier to think of it as 4 parts. Her first task falls in that part of like what people call fun and games, where things are going well. And then, but then I noticed the midpoint, because I like looking at whatever the midpoint is in a story, because that's usually really consistent in all movies. That's pretty much expected, I would say, no matter what kind of story structure it has. It usually something in the midpoint shifts the story. And that was when she made the mistake, or when she disobeyed in the second ordeal. And so then right after that, the fawn leaves her, and then she's kind of stuck in the real world, and things are getting darker and darker, which fits, usually in the 4-part structure. It's like the second half of the second act, things are going downhill. The stakes are raising. So you see that happening for sure. Everything in the real world is getting a lot darker. So it seems to me that, like, if you're thinking about it like a hero's journey, that when there's that point of, which instead of this happening at the midpoint, it's a little bit later, the point of like stealing something or whatever, you could kind of say that that's the third task of her getting the brother. I think that only loosely applies. But she does go and steal her brother, and then there's the there's the flight. So that fits the kind of classic structure where she's running away from, whatever was guarding that thing that she stole is after her now. And then resurrection happens, self-explanatory. So that kind of concept, which can be kind of the crossing, that can be like the crossing back into the world that you like, crossing back, and wow, I can talk. Crossing the threshold back into the world. In this case, it's not her going back; it's her finally leaving, either because she's completely dead, or because she has, gone into the underworld. Whichever interpretation you choose to believe. Yeah, because you could look at it from another perspective, which is that this is her returning. If you think about it as like the princess that had her soul or whatever left that world a long time ago, and so now she's finally returned. It's kind of wonky to think about it that way, but that's just another perspective. So those are my other notes that I was putting, like kind of technical things about like how this matches Campbell's conception of a myth, and then also kind of where that maps onto what you expect usually in screenplays.
So does it map onto the hero's journey? Is this a hero's journey? Are you saying yes or no?
I think if you understand it in its broadest sense, yes. I think it fits into the most flexible, when you see it as a very flexible kind of a thing. It's a fairy tale, and theoretically all fairy tales and myths in their oldest forms will follow this. That's at least what he proposes. So yeah. And one of the things that he says too in the book is that there's a lot of variation, that things don't necessarily happen at a certain point. Like today, when we write a screenplay, we think about the hero's journey happening at this part of this act, and that's not at all what Campbell was talking about, because he's talking about like old stories. So I was looking both at that, and then also at kind of modern expectations in filmmaking, because you have certain beats. We always expect, like I said, the midpoint, there's a shift that happens. We tend to always work in the 3-act structure and stuff like that, but the hero's journey doesn't have to. So yeah, I think it loosely fits.
Does she get what she wants or what she needs?
Does she get what she wants or what she needs? Well, I think the answer depends totally on whether or not the fantasy world is real. Because I want to say she does. Either she gets both of those things, or she imagines that she does.
Because we've set up a structure previously, and we're talking about that if you get what you want, you're in a tragedy. If you get what you need, you're in a happy ending story, also called a comedy in the classic Greek sense. So is she getting what she wants or what she needs? Is this a comedy or is it a tragedy?
Well, she wants to escape.
And if she wants to escape, if she wants to escape and she gets death,
which is a form of escape, but it's not
exactly
right. So it's kind of, I think that also is open to interpretation. It's tragic. It feels tragic, but also from her perspective, either one is kind of what she wanted. It could be that she's reinterpreting her death as something more heroic. That, I wasn't just murdered, I sacrificed myself, and now I'm returning to this underworld where I'm going to be a princess. And yeah,
I think it's very easy to say that what she wants is escape.
Yeah.
That seems to be very easy. What she wants is escape. Does she get escape? Yes.
Yeah.
So under that schema, this would be a tragedy.
What does she need though? Because it's not always a tragedy if you get what you want. It's
no. Wait, it's not a tragedy if you get what you want. What?
not always. Sometimes what you want and what you need are not in conflict.
No. We're supposed to contrast what you want and what you need.
Nah.
Really?
Not always. Not always. I think it's possible to have stories where, right? Because the happiest endings are one where the characters get what they want and what they need. A lot of like romantic comedies are going to do that. You know, you're getting all of the things. Not necessarily. It doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes, but no, I think that's not necessarily a tragedy. But if you get what you want instead of getting what you need, that's a tragedy. So the question is, what is it that she needs in the story?
Okay, what does she need? Let's think about that. What does she? I think it's clear. I think that's pretty clear that she wants escape.
Right.
What does she need?
Anyone in the comments?
No.
I haven't thought about this question. Because
you don't. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's multiple ways to think about need too, because you can think about moral need in terms of what the character needs to learn. You can think about, material needs, like what does the character need in order to survive or thrive in some other way. And that sometimes characters can have multiple needs too. So,
well, as Erchio Fuma says, escape can also be a need. Yes, it can be.
It's possible that both of these are what she wants and what she needs.
And I'm rejecting that though. I'm rejecting that I'm going to put both of those on those things, because you could say that about any of the characters. Like when you're talking about characters in desperate situations, and yet there are characters that we see that are involved in that they could take an easy escape, which might be death, and yet they're fighting on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we do have examples of that in this story. Well, okay, no, wait a minute. I want to talk about another example of this, but we have examples of this where we're talking about that we see in the story about people who could just die and escape the problem. Mm-hmm. But that's not what you need to do. You need to fight on. Okay. Now, that actually puts the death of the person who's being tortured in a different light.
Yeah, see, I'm not sure if I agree with that because
what does that person want? Escape. And what did the doctor do provided that?
Yeah, but I can't see that moment as being tragic on his end, as if he did something wrong for...
No, it doesn't have to be tragic on his end, because it's not a tragedy about him. It's a story about her.
Yeah.
But that what happens to him could be commentary on her story.
Oh, so fascinating.
Yes, he is an example of somebody who says, I need escape. And that escape is death. And the doctor...
That's so depressing.
I know. Well, that's when I watched it the second time and started watching it. I was like, I love the dark fantasy of this. I love this. But when I was watching this the second time, like I said, I didn't watch it all the way through the second time. But I was interpreting it in a very dark kind of way. And so, but actually, I didn't get to this part again, but here we go. Here's an example. What do I want? I want escape, and that's death, and it's come and provided to me. Okay. So now, does that mirror her, that she wants escape from the hell that is the real life?
Right.
And is it provided to her? Yeah, it is. He shoots her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's another question. How would this be different if we never saw the final scene? What if, because she doesn't see him with the people at the end. Mm-hmm. Okay, because that's after she's died. So let's say that we never shoot that last scene where the captain gets shot. And instead he just walks away with his son and kills her.
Yeah.
Okay. Then would I be inclined to say this is a tragedy?
Yeah, I'd say that's
Okay.
pretty awful.
Okay.
He wins,
Yes.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Then I think that because this story is about her,
Mhm.
then it has to be a tragedy. We only seem maybe hypothesis. We only see this as something that is more positive because he walks out, he himself is killed, and the child is taken. But her story is tragic then.
If the fantasy world isn't real, I think. Because those two things, I think, both affect how you feel about that ending. Is, did she actually go into the underworld, and then what happens to her brother and her stepfather?
Is it though, if we say that she achieved escape, and either she achieved escape through death, and that was just the end, or she achieved escape and ended up in heaven, the other alternative.
Right.
Heaven's better than just being dead, I suppose. Right, yeah.
Right.
But nonetheless, she wanted it. She wanted escape, and that's what she got. Does it matter that the escape was a great thing because it's heaven or because it's nihilistic death?
I think it matters a lot, though.
You really think it matters a lot?
It matters a lot emotionally.
Maybe, well, it matters a lot, but maybe that's the question that we're supposed to be having here. Because, okay, the result in both cases is that she's dead. But it does matter how we feel about it.
Yeah.
If you say that, well, there's no soul and she was shot and she's dead. Or if you say, well, she was shot and she's dead, but now she's a princess in heaven. You feel better about it, but that doesn't change the facts in the material world. Oh, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because you could say that a lot of the story, that maybe a sub theme of it, has to do with perspective too, and how different people are looking at these dark things. Looking at it, for example, you have the doctor who is fighting even though he believes that it's a lost cause. You have the rebels who are saying, oh yeah, maybe it's a lost cause, but at least we're going to make it difficult for him. That they still have this attitude of sort of defiant optimism in the face of darkness. You have the mother who's just kind of accepted that the world is dark and that's just how things are, and you need to grow up and understand that that's just how things are, which is pretty dismal. And then you have Ophelia who's like, I don't want to accept that that this is all there is. I have to believe that there is also beauty and magic and other places that I could be, that I could get to. And so that it's like she's reframing the darkness in a different light. And so I wonder if that is how that plays into this, where it's like thinking about, how do you think about the dark things that happen in the world, and does that change their reality in a sense?
Well, that's a deeper direction than I was expecting it all to go.
Yeah, because one of the things, I haven't thought about this all that much, but there's other analysis to be had about her story paralleled with the rebels, because it's basically two narratives going on. Mm-hmm. And like, if they had the attitude that her mother has, for example, they wouldn't have won in the end, because they still had that perspective of that sort of defiant optimism, and they kept fighting. Eventually they did end up overpowering the captain. And so that changed the reality. That changed the reality. Their attitude and their perspective on things did change the outcomes. Did hers? Maybe. Maybe. Change her experience.
Zero Theory says if you go with the fantasy is real, shooting her is a good thing because she spills innocent blood and she gets what she needs. And see, when I first watched that movie through, I thought that's where this was going, because when her hand falls over the pit, mm-hmm. I was going, oh my God, her blood is innocent, and that's what's about to change things. Mm-hmm. But it actually doesn't in the real world. Like I was expecting there to be magic that appears and something, and that it doesn't fix anything in the real world. Mm-hmm. Now I'm actually thinking that scene with the death of the captain should not be there. Because if you either are going to have her hand fall over the pit and her blood is going to conjure magic that's going to fix the situation there, saying this is all real, or as we had, it doesn't, because we know it doesn't, because he goes on, he takes her, and the only reason that it's okay is because the rebels were there and they kill him.
Right, but I disagree because
Okay.
like I was saying, it's basically two narratives, and so that is the conclusion of the narratives with Mercedes, like with her story. Basically, she's kind of the other protagonist. With the rebels, the conclusion is that they win, and so you have these two different narratives, and there's definitely something to be analyzed with how they complement each other, which I didn't really go into that. Maybe next time I watch it, I will. Because there might be something to that in the sense that like is their perspective did have an effect in the real world, and that you had to see the consequences of the villain's actions and the heroic results of their actions as well, which could be an interesting segue if we want to talk about the villain.
Right, because the philosophy that we have been using in previous discussions was that if you're going to end in tragedy, that's fine, but that the choice that the hero or heroine made, you're supposed to know is wrong. And in this case, it seems like it is telling us that the choice she made is right.
Which is probably why I have such a gut resistance to calling it a tragedy, because I can't see her as having done anything wrong.
Yeah. So that I think you're under that philosophy. I think you would be correct that what she do is correct. She refused to give her brother to the fawn. Was that the correct decision? Now, it should be that our story is telling us what that is supposed. Now, I have to think about that in more detail because I'm not sure that is the whole story leading up to tell us not to sacrifice another.
No, it's leading to say that sometimes you should disobey.
Sometimes you should disobey.
That's
you're right. Disobedience. The story is about disobedience.
Because she
this story is
disobeyed
telling you should disobey.
She disobeyed the fawn because he gave a cruel order.
She disobeyed. So you're right. That is the correct answer. You're completely right about that. That was the correct answer. Okay, now I've got to think about how that situation.
It takes both of our brains to understand the story.
Yeah. So that was right. So with the fawn, so if it had ended there, that would have been right. Now, what happened with did she turn over, or did she turn over the brother, or did he take it from her?
I think he took it, I think.
Okay.
She's kind of standing there helplessly, like, I don't know what to do. I can't fight him. I can't run anymore. And he just takes it and
okay. I'm gonna have to watch this again, because then if the story is telling you the right thing to do is disobey, and he walks up and he says, "Give him to me," and she does it, then she should be shot. And that's the happy ending story, because you know that the answer is you're not supposed to obey an order like that. So if he walks up, says, "Give me my brother," or "Give me my son," she turns over the brother, and then he shoots her. That's the correct solution to that story. And then if he just walks off, you know what it was supposed to have been. Now, alternatively, she could say no and run away, and then something else could happen, and then he could get eaten by a tree or something like that, right? And you would still have the same message.
Yeah, and so which maybe plays into why that ending is necessary for to see that he doesn't get away with it, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't get away with it. I'll have to look at it again. But because it has to do with another person, that's weird. I mean, so like, what if she isn't the protagonist? You always do have to be careful about things like that, and because sometimes stories do sneak that the actual protagonist is somebody else than you think it is.
I think it just has two. It has an A plot and a B plot, and she's the protagonist of the A plot, and Mercedes is the protagonist of the B plot.
James says it's kind of, what are you willing to believe to comfort yourself? If she dies, her brother is saved from the life of the captain. Wait, if she dies, her brother is saved from the life. Well, not necessarily. Because she doesn't know who else is on the other side of the wall. Right. Disobey when it's the right thing to do. Now that becomes more complicated Like, but the story is more simpler than that. We've got these people are giving orders, and what's the right thing to do is to disobey. Because, like you could say, because you're looking. I'm looking for a message of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for that message to be overly complicated.
Yeah.
Like it's like when you're talking about Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie, you don't want to say use the Force when it's the right thing to do. No, the message is use the Force.
I think. Oops, I just dropped my pen. I think that the message has got to be like disobey cruelty, like don't obey tyrants, something like that.
Okay. Do you want to talk about do you have time to talk about the villain?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's talk about your villain arc, because I didn't have any notes on the villain's arc, so let's talk about that. I'd be interested to know what you have to say.
I have so many notes. I won't go through all of them. So he's such an interesting character because he is just so despicable, and I love the way that they set him up. The very first scene, you instantly realize just how controlling he is. Like when he sees the mother, the first thing he does is he's like, all right, I want you to sit in this chair. And she's uncomfortable.
No, the first thing he does is touch her belly.
Oh, that too. Yeah, that's right. That's a good point, because all she is to him is just a vessel for, he doesn't care about her at all. She's the vessel for him to have a male offspring. And so he's very sexist, which is also one of his important flaws, and condescending. And so, with her, you see that sense of controlling, like, you need to do this because I want you to. And she obeys. I guess the mother is maybe kind of an example of what not to do in some cases in the story. I'm just having that thought right now. And then and then Ophelia, she reaches out the wrong hand, and he just kind of like holds her hand and kind of crushes it, like in a very uncomfortable way, very, controlling, owning kind of an action. He's like, wrong hand, condescending, all that. So you just immediately, I thought that was an excellent way, just instantly set this character up. You don't understand how cruel he is yet, but you understand that he's not good in very subtle ways. It's later when he commits that just completely unnecessary violent murder that you realize who he really is. And so he's an interesting character because he's also complicated. He's not just pure evil all the time. You can see his humanity, especially on a second viewing. And so I was kind of thinking about, like, what is it that he believes? How does he see himself? And it seems to me that he sees himself as, like, his acts of tyranny are actually acts of like strength and courage, that he's like standing up, and he's got the thing with his father, the story of his father who died in battle. And he has this little pocket watch that that broke the moment he died. And so he's always carrying it with him. And it's like a little kid trying to step into his father's big shoes. Is kind of how I feel like his character is, that he's like overcompensating for his own insecurities and fears by trying to just be, just pushing that into a state of, cruelty. Like, he's being cruel to people and being just totally brutal. And he believes that he is being brave, that he is being strong, and he's trying to be as valiant as his father. He thinks that he is untouchable, that he's superior to the rebels, and that justifies basically any action. I think he kind of sees himself as like an exterminator, like he's going to come in and he's going to get rid of these pests, and that any means are justifiable to do this. But somewhere a little bit past the halfway part of the story is where the arc gets really interesting to me, because all of those flaws that he has start having consequences. And all of his actions that he takes as a result of those flaws start having a ripple effect that leads to his destruction. So the first thing is where he exerts that sort of, condescending power over Ophelia when he finds the mandrake under the bed. Mm-hmm. So the first thing he does, he shames her for that and all that. They end up destroying the mandrake. Consequence, wife starts to get sick again, which is interesting in light of our earlier conversation about whether the magic is true.
Right, whether or not that's real or not.
Very much like that's a consequence. So another thing, of course, he tortures the captured rebel for information, and then he commands the doctor to to tend to him so he can keep torturing him. And so that's, of course, about as horrible a thing as you can do as a human being. instant consequence, the doctor disobeys him and ends up kind of giving the rebel a peaceful death. This part was interesting because the doctor is kind of poking at his flawed beliefs. We mentioned this earlier, but he's saying that, like, to disobey an order like that without questioning at all, only someone like you could do that. So I think he's pointing out a little bit of how the villain is embodies sort of the negative aspects of the theme, because he's also following orders. Even though he's the one giving cruel orders, he has people above him that you don't see them, but it's implied that he is, following his duty in a sense, and that he thinks that it makes him in the right. So of course he shoots the doctor, and then immediately finds out that his wife needs medical assistance, and after he just killed the doctor. And so they do bring someone in, but it's not fast enough, or maybe the person isn't good enough. It's not
skilled enough. That's why.
Yeah, not skilled enough.
Get somebody else who's not as good.
So she dies. Maybe that's not a huge thing to him, because all she is a vehicle for his offspring. But of course, Ophelia turns even more against him at that point, which I think is important. So I love the moment with Mercedes, where when he finally figures out that she's the rebel spy and he's about to torture her as well, he literally says out loud, he sends someone out. She's like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to be alone with her? And he's like, oh, she's just a woman. And literally, like, has his back turned to her the whole time, completely thinks she's, because that's one of his flaws, is that he's really condescending, including towards women. And of course, she has a knife with her. So while his back is turned, thinking he's completely safe because she's just a woman, she comes and stabs him. And
yet she doesn't kill him.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't kill him, but I don't think she was intending to.
Well, I know, but you could argue she should have.
I think so. The first time I watched it, I was like, "What are you doing? Kill him!" I don't understand why she doesn't in that moment. I haven't really thought about it, but I love her saying, "You won't be the first pig I've gutted," and she leaves him scarred, and she leaves him weakened, right? And so then there's a moment when he realizes that he's outnumbered. And it's at that moment he has a shift where it seems that his focus gets smaller, right? Because at first his goal is just to, his goal is grandiose. He's going to, exterminate these rebels and all this stuff. And he's going to pass on this. You can see that there's this issue of legacy with him. He's trying to fulfill the legacy of his father. He wants to pass on a legacy. He wants to be that good and also pass on a legacy to his son. And so when he realizes he's losing the fight, he stops caring about all that stuff, and his focus gets small. He's just concerned about his son. He starts to realize, okay, I just need to salvage what really matters here, which you can tell that's kind of the core thing that is driving him. And so, of course, he chases Ophelia to get the boy. And because she's so just hates him at this point, she also ends up putting that stuff in his drink, which was brilliant because how in that episode in the Star Wars show, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, where these people are chasing little Leia, and for some reason she escapes them, even though she's this little girl, and they're these adults and they're just running.
Oh yeah. I stopped watching that show after.
So stupid. It's like, but this was an example of someone actually allowing for that in the plot. Like he has stuff in, like he can't keep up with her because he's like, this stuff is kind of making him like fall asleep, kind of thing. Like he's staggering. And
I misunderstood that the first watch through.
Right.
I thought that when Ophelia was putting that in something, because I think I even said when we were watching, I was like, oh my God, that's probably enough.
Yeah.
Because I thought that what she was doing was trying to drug the child so that the child wouldn't yell out or cry while she was escaping. So that's why I was like, oh my God, that's probably enough. Like you're just trying to drug an infant. That's why I said that.
Yeah.
But then I realized, oh no, she's drugging him, and that's why she
which was really smart of her. So he of course he finally does catch up to her, and he thinks that he wins at this point. All he has left is himself and his son. the battle's going, it's not going well, and then he comes out and he's surrounded, and all the rebels are there, and he realizes he doesn't even have that anymore. He understands he's about to die. So he's like, okay, I'm going to try to face this courageously, just like my father. So he calmly hands over the son. And it's like, so all he has left is that legacy. I think that's the one thing that matters most to him. And so at that moment, he's like trying to, say, he tries to tell them what to tell his son so that he can pass his legacy on. And then Mercedes, of course, cuts him off and is like, no, he's not even going to remember your name. And that moment is so great because you see the moment in his eyes where he realizes he has nothing. He doesn't have his son. He doesn't have his life. He doesn't have his legacy. He's no one. He's nothing. No one will remember him positively. And he dies. It's just such a beautiful, satisfying destruction of a villain. I find that the thing that he matters most to him, he loses that as well. He loses everything. And it's all directly a result of his own flaws, his own just shittiness. So,
well, when you explain his arc like that,
yeah,
then that explains why it can't end with him just walking off after he shoots Ophelia. So if you're talking about his arc, if you're talking, Ophelia's story ends then when she's shot and he walks off.
Yes, I think that's true.
But we have this extra element that we have to see the conclusion of his arc then?
Right. His arc and Mercedes' arc. Which again, another beautiful note is that it is a woman that kills him. So she doesn't kill him at the beginning.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, was it not her? I thought it.
No. It was her boyfriend who actually shoots him. Her boyfriend pulls up and shoots him in the face.
Well, that would have been good if it had been her. But oh well. I don't know why I remembered it the way. I guess it's because she's
the one talking. She's the element of that scene, but it's actually her boyfriend who then pulls the gun.
Well, that is fitting too, because that gives him something. Because otherwise, his character is just kind of there, and so that gives him something that he does in the end. That is very meaningful as well.
But now actually that makes me wonder, because you and I have struggled quite a bit with multiple story threads that have to end in the stuff that we have been writing and that we have been talking about.
It's hard to pull off.
And it's hard to pull off. And now we have two different scenes. Now we don't have time to talk about this, to get into it or try to rewrite it tonight. But now that makes me wonder if there is some other way to write that so that all those things do happen in the same scene.
I don't know if they have to in this case, because they are kind of distinctly different threads. They're interweaving with each other. But like when we were talking about kind of things being concluded in one scene, it's usually because there's multiple things with a single character that are going on, and the things that you and I have talked about. So all that has to be, all that character's arc has to happen in one moment, has to conclude. Whereas in this case, I think it's okay. To have, because it is like different story threads. It doesn't bother me.
Well, let me just ask this question then here at the end, that if we've come to the conclusion that this movie is about disobedience, I mean, this seems to me like something that's extremely relevant, and extremely important to humanity, and it actually even comes up with the themes of Dungeons and Dragons that we talk about on this channel quite a bit and things like that. When you're talking about a character's alignment, that you'll have like characters who are neutral, you'll have characters who are good, and you'll have characters who are evil, or you have characters who are lawful, neutral, or chaotic. And you've got this thing here that we have this element in this story about rules following, and is that good? And of course, this story is talking about disobedience being good. And the simplification, like we don't get into like when is blah, blah, blah. We're talking about this story is telling you that the disobedience to authority is good. That's what we're trying to go to. Is that a message that we need in today's world?
Sometimes. I think so.
Well, it's hard to say something. I mean, because we could say sometimes to everything.
Well, yeah, but that's real life. Stories are always going to be, like you say, you don't want to get into too much depth and complexity. You're usually going to kind of focus on one aspect of a theme. But like in the real world, you have to recognize that the message you may get from this story can also integrate with a seemingly contradictory message from another story, and that you should work them together. And that's what I would say, is that like you have to realize that Yeah, morality is complicated. How to behave as a social animal in a complicated, social group with very intelligent beings. In other words, how to be a human being is complicated. So I would say, yeah, sometimes and sometimes not. But you're saying specifically in our world today. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm just saying that if we're talking about like let's constrain it to U.S. culture since we're here in the United States.
Sure.
Is the message you'd want to send to people in the U.S. that we are suffering from a lack of obedience, or that we are suffering from too much obedience?
Well, this was made in 2004, I think. So depends. Maybe
In 2004. So I mean, okay. So let's talk. Yeah, okay. So you're completely right that I mean things are told in the context of the time in which they are.
right.
Now it depends on how exactly minute you want to make that moment. But okay, so in 2004 is the message of this movie that we need more disobedience.
Back then, probably. I want to make sure I have my date right. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, 2006. That was pretty close.
2006. Okay. 2006 is the message that we are being too obedient to authority. And so this is a claim to try to be more, that we should be more disobedient.
I still don't know if I like putting it in that kind of a way. Like it's a story about the values of disobedience. Does that mean that you should take away from that we should all be disobedient more? It seems maybe some people take away their meanings from stories that way, but I don't think we should, in my opinion.
Or okay, let me rephrase. The message of this movie is that we should be more aware of when we should be disobedient.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. I can agree with that.
That we should be
Sure.
more aware. That would be very interesting. Now, that of course that makes me actually think, like, what kind of story would you tell? Would you tell a story about when you should be more obedient? What is a story about when that is telling this extolling the virtues of obedience?
My personality is one that is more naturally rebellious against things, so it's hard for me to say that. But
Well, I'm just talking about I'm just talking about stories, like stories that we
I know,
watch, movies that we got.
my
Like
brain
when
won't
we
even
watch
want to
one, like what do we have that when a movie or a story is telling us that extolling the virtues of obedience?
There's this ancient one from thousands of years ago that I instantly think of, which is the Ramayan in Hinduism, which is interesting because they have the Mahabharata and the Ramayan, which are basically kind of these two binaries of the Ramayan is like when are the situations when you should, the way of the Dharma, basically the correct way to behave is by following the rules of your society. And then Mahabharata is talking about what are the times when you should not follow the rules of your society. That's a vast oversimplification, but yeah.
James, so this is a good point. James says certainly some stories in the Bible,
Bible
some
definitely
biblical stories are talking about the values of obedience. Okay, yeah, I can see that. I see. Fuma says blind obedience is equal to bad. All right. Well, that's something to think about because these you probably have to go because we're wrapping up here. But these seem to be like really important questions.
Yeah,
and that we deal with in story. So I would say that here is a story that is telling us that extolling the virtues of disobedience is talking about how important disobedience can be. Okay, and in those situations, and I think we all have to engage with that as citizens. As people today, when are you going to be obedient? When is disobedience the correct answer? There are all kinds of opposites that we all have to deal with, right? Obedience, disobedience. These are the things. Now, in the stories, we simplify them, and this one is telling you that okay, the correct solution is disobedience. In these contexts, we're talking about disobedience, like when you're talking about Star Wars, the original, or you're talking about technology or faith. That's talking about faith, that you need to, adhere to faith. This one's talking about disobedience. And I think I would say that these are questions that we wrestle with. And if you're not wrestling with them, then you're not fully engaging as a citizen or politically, because these are the kinds of things that we all have to think about that have extremely serious consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that if you don't think about them, and if you're not willing to acknowledge the seriousness of those consequences, then you aren't seriously engaging with them. What am I talking about here when I say, here's the limit of my obedience?
Right.
Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean people are going to die? Probably. Does it mean a lot of people are going to die? Probably. Whatever that means. So I think that's probably why these stories and kinds of things that we engage with these kinds of things in stories and think about them, because they're important elements of the world.
Damn, this conversation got way deeper than I think either of us thought it was going to.
This got deep. Okay. So, it's World Building Wednesday tomorrow morning. Thursday, though, Doug Burton, I'm going to be talking with Doug Burton about his philosophy. I was specifically recommended Doug to talk to by Cameron. Cameron told me, go and talk to Doug, because he has this particular philosophy on the heroic feminine. So we're going to be talking, I'm going to be understanding and trying to understand his philosophy on Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. right here. And then we're doing something a week from now. I forget what that is.
Well,
what is it that you're talking about? Let me look it up.
We can get to it first. Oh, Cameron.
Cameron. I think we saw this moment. Cameron Pasha is going to be here next week, because we are talking about more on The Fall. We're going to be talking about the particular story arc of The Fall 1 week from today. So it's actually going to be a rare 3-person table talk. Brianna's going to be here, and then Cameron is also going to be here, and we're going to get Cameron's perspective on The Fall, because we think that's an important perspective on story. So that's what's happening here.
And I may bring this movie up again, because I kind of feel like the villain kind of experiences a fall, in the sense that anyway,
okay. Well, we'll talk about this. We got to need more clarity on what The Fall is. There's actually the next Thursday, I've got someone to talk to who is launching a Kickstarter campaign on RPGs. So that'll be happening next Thursday. So uncharacteristically, I have a bunch of that kind of stuff. And then we're supposed to be talking about Paradise Lost. We're talking about Paradise Lost, maybe the next Thursday, or maybe we'll just have to see. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. So Tuesday and Thursday nights can be big for the next couple of weeks, everybody. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I will see you tomorrow morning. It has been great. Bye, everybody.